Schliemann believed he was searching for a single city.
Instead, he uncovered centuries of forgotten civilizations, stacked one upon another.
Each generation had rebuilt the settlement after disaster.
Sometimes after war, sometimes after earthquakes, sometimes after fire. The result was not one city. It was an archaeological archive spanning more than 3,000 years. Every few meters beneath the surface represented another chapter in human history.
As archaeologists continued excavating throughout the 20th century, they realized the mound contained at least 10 major settlement phases, each with multiple periods of rebuilding. To make sense of this complex history, researchers labeled them Troy 1 through Troy 10.
The earliest settlement appeared around 3000 BC, at the beginning of the early Bronze Age.
Compared to the legendary city of Homer, it was modest, a small fortified community with stone foundations and mud brick houses. Its inhabitants were farmers, herders, craftsmen, and traders. Life revolved around survival rather than empire. Yet even this first settlement occupied the same strategic hill overlooking the Dardanelles. Generation after generation recognized the value of this location. The city grew. Walls became thicker. Buildings became larger. Trade expanded. Over the following centuries, Troy developed into one of the most important settlements in the region. But prosperity also brought danger. Cities controlling valuable trade routes often attracted ambitious neighbors. Again and again, Troy was destroyed. Again and again, it was rebuilt. Some destructions were sudden. Others left signs of gradual decline. The archaeological layers preserved these moments with remarkable clarity. Collapsed walls, burned timber, broken pottery buried beneath rubble, arrowheads embedded in defensive structures, human skeletons abandoned where they had fallen. Each layer became a frozen moment in time. Each disaster left its own signature. For decades, archaeologists focused on one question above all others. Which of these cities matched Homer's Troy? At first glance, Troy 6 seemed like the strongest candidate. Dating to approximately 1700-1250 BC, it was unlike anything discovered beneath it. Its defensive walls were enormous. Built from carefully cut limestone blocks, some reached nearly 5 meters in thickness. Instead of simple straight walls, the builders designed sloping fortifications that could better resist attack. Massive towers overlooked the surrounding plain. Wide gateways controlled access to the city. Anyone approaching Troy would immediately understand that this was no ordinary settlement. Inside the citadel stood impressive multi-room buildings with stone foundations. The streets followed a carefully planned layout. Storage facilities suggested organized administration. Imported pottery from Greece, Anatolia, Cyprus, and the Eastern Mediterranean revealed an extensive trading network. This was not an isolated fortress. It was a prosperous international city connected to the great civilizations of the Bronze Age. For many years, Troy 6 seemed almost perfect. Powerful, wealthy, strategically located. Exactly the kind of city that could inspire epic poetry. Then, archaeologists noticed something unexpected. The evidence for its destruction did not resemble war. Many of the stone walls had collapsed in similar directions. Buildings
appeared crushed rather than burned. Human remains were surprisingly scarce. Instead of widespread signs of battle, the city displayed characteristics more consistent with a powerful earthquake. The walls themselves told the story. Large sections had shifted outward. Stones had fallen in patterns difficult to explain through siege alone. It seemed increasingly likely that nature, not an invading army, had ended the city. If Troy 6 had fallen because of an earthquake, then perhaps Homer's city had to be somewhere else. Attention shifted to the settlement built immediately afterward, Troy 7A. At first glance, it looked remarkably similar to Troy 6. Its inhabitants reused many of the existing fortifications. They repaired damaged walls. They rebuilt houses within the old defenses. But subtle differences suggested that life had changed dramatically. The city felt more crowded. Homes were divided into smaller rooms. Large storage jars, known as pithoi, were buried beneath floors to hold grain, oil, and water. These were not luxury features. They suggested preparation for uncertainty, preparation for siege, preparation for survival. Then came the discoveries that transformed the debate. Several buildings showed unmistakable evidence of violent fire. Arrowheads were recovered from destruction layers. Human skeletons appeared in unusual positions, some left unburied among collapsed structures. Unlike the destruction of Troy 6, this looked far more like the aftermath of conflict. The dating was equally intriguing. Troy 7A was destroyed around 1180 BC, give or take several decades. That date falls remarkably close to the traditional period when many historians believe the Trojan War, if it occurred at all, might have taken place. For the first time, archaeology and literary tradition appeared to move into the same historical window. Still, caution remained essential. None of this proved that Homer's war had happened. Ancient cities were destroyed frequently. Fire alone could not identify one specific conflict, nor could a handful of arrowheads. Archaeologists must distinguish possibility from proof. The evidence suggested that Troy 7A experienced a violent end. It did not reveal who attacked or why. Meanwhile, another line of evidence was beginning to emerge far beyond the ruins of Troy itself. Thousands of clay tablets discovered in the archives of the Hittite Empire were being translated. These diplomatic records described kingdoms, treaties, military campaigns, and political disputes across Western Anatolia. Among the names appearing on these tablets were two that immediately caught historians' attention: Wilusa and Ahiyawa. To many scholars, these names sounded remarkably familiar. Could Wilusa be the Hittite rendering of Ilios, another ancient Greek name for Troy? Could Ahiyawa refer to the Achaeans, the Mycenaean Greeks who fight against Troy in the Iliad? The similarities were impossible to ignore. Even more intriguing, the tablets described political tensions, changing alliances, and occasional military conflicts involving Wilusa. They never mention Achilles. They never mention Helen. They never describe a wooden horse. But they do demonstrate that a strategically important kingdom existed in precisely the region where archaeologists had uncovered Troy. For many historians, this represented one of the strongest links yet between archaeology and ancient tradition. Not proof, but evidence that the legend may have preserved the memory of real political conflicts from the late Bronze Age. Slowly, the picture became clearer, not because of one spectacular discovery, but by hundreds of tiny pieces joined together. But because dozens of independent pieces of evidence began pointing in the same direction. A wealthy city, a strategic location, evidence of destruction, international trade, diplomatic records, Bronze Age conflict. None of these alone could solve the mystery. Together, however, they suggested something remarkable. Perhaps Homer had not invented Troy. Perhaps he had inherited fragments of genuine history, stories passed from generation to generation for centuries before finally becoming poetry. But one mystery still remained. If Troy had truly been a powerful Bronze Age city, how large was it, really? For decades, archaeologists had focused almost entirely on the hilltop citadel. Yet recent discoveries suggested they had been looking at only a small part of the ancient city. The greatest revelation was still waiting beneath the fields surrounding Hisarlik. By the late 20th century, many historians believed the greatest discoveries at Troy had already been made. The citadel had been excavated, its walls had been measured, its pottery had been catalogued. Generations of archaeologists had spent more than a century studying the mound. Surely, there was little left to discover. They were wrong. The next breakthrough did not come from a shovel. It came from technology. Modern archaeology no longer depends solely on excavation. Every trench permanently destroys part of the archaeological record, so researchers increasingly rely on non-invasive methods before digging. Instruments that can see beneath the ground allow archaeologists to investigate ancient landscapes while leaving them undisturbed. Ground-penetrating radar, magnetometry, electrical resistivity surveys, aerial photography, satellite imagery. Later, high-resolution LiDAR mapping and drone photogrammetry would help researchers build detailed digital models of the site and its surrounding landscape. Together, these technologies revealed something astonishing. The hill of Hisarlik was only the center of the settlement. The famous citadel, the place tourists visit today, represented just a fraction of ancient Troy. Beyond the massive walls lay an extensive lower city. For decades, this area had remained almost invisible because it was buried beneath fields and later deposits. Yet beneath the soil, traces of roads, defensive ditches, workshops, storage areas, and residential districts began to emerge. The discovery transformed historians' understanding of Troy. Instead of a small hilltop fortress housing only a few hundred people, Troy now appeared to have been a much larger urban center. Although archaeologists continue to debate its exact size and population, the evidence suggests that during its peak, the settlement extended well beyond the citadel and supported a far larger community than earlier estimates allowed. This also changed how historians viewed Troy's role in the Bronze Age. Large cities require organization. They require administration, food distribution, craft production, trade, defense. The lower city suggested that Troy was not merely a military stronghold.
It functioned as a regional economic center, connected to long-distance exchange networks across the eastern Mediterranean. Archaeologists recovered imported pottery from Mycenaean Greece, objects influenced by Anatolian traditions. Materials linked to Cyprus and other regions of the eastern Mediterranean. Each discovery reinforced the same conclusion. Troy was part of an interconnected world. Bronze Age civilizations did not exist in isolation. Merchants crossed the sea. Diplomats negotiated treaties. Craftsmen exchanged ideas. Luxury goods traveled thousands of kilometers. And with prosperity came competition. The Dardanelles remained one of the most strategically important waterways in the region. Any kingdom capable of controlling maritime traffic through this narrow passage could influence trade between the Aegean and the Black Sea. Whether ancient rulers taxed passing merchants, protected shipping, or simply benefited from their location remains debated. What is clear is that geography made Troy exceptionally valuable. A city occupying such a position would naturally attract both allies and rivals. That observation leads to one of the most important questions surrounding the Trojan War. Was there really a single, enormous conflict lasting 10 years, exactly as Homer described? Most historians think the answer is probably no. The Iliad was composed centuries after the events it may reflect. Its purpose was not to record history in the modern sense. It was epic poetry. Its heroes possess extraordinary strength. Its speeches are carefully crafted. Its battles serve dramatic storytelling. The gods intervene constantly in human affairs. No archaeologist expects to uncover evidence for Athena standing beside Achilles or Apollo directing arrows across the battlefield. Yet dismissing the poem entirely would be equally misleading. Oral traditions often preserve genuine memories, even as details change over generations. Real places survive. Names remain recognizable. Political rivalries become legendary. Historical battles merge into one great war. Historical figures become larger than life. Many scholars now suggest that the Trojan War, described by Homer, may represent a literary memory built upon one or more real conflicts that occurred around the end of the Bronze Age. Instead of a single, perfectly preserved historical event, the Iliad may combine decades of warfare, diplomacy, and regional struggles into one unforgettable narrative. This idea explains something remarkable. Archaeology and literature do not tell identical stories, but neither do they completely contradict one another. Both describe a wealthy city in northwestern Anatolia. Both place it near the entrance to the Dardanelles. Both connect it with Mycenaean Greece. Both remember a period of conflict during the late Bronze Age. The differences lie in the details. History records probabilities. Epic poetry seeks meaning. For more than a century, archaeologists have continued working at Hisarlik. Every excavation season produces new questions alongside new discoveries. Fragments of pottery refine ancient chronologies. Animal bones reveal changing diets. Seeds preserved beneath collapsed buildings
help reconstruct agriculture and climate. Microscopic traces of charcoal identify ancient fires. Even the chemistry of the soil can reveal how different parts of the city were used. Modern archaeology no longer searches only for spectacular treasures. A broken cooking pot may reveal more about everyday life than a golden necklace. A discarded seed may provide better evidence than a magnificent weapon. Every fragment contributes to a larger picture. The search for Troy has become more than the search for a legendary city. It has become an attempt to understand an entire civilization that disappeared more than 3,000 years ago. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson archaeology offers. The past rarely survives as complete stories. It survives in pieces. A wall, a road, a broken cup, a treaty written on clay, a poem passed from one generation to the next. None of these pieces is enough on its own. Together, they allow us to reconstruct a world that time almost erased. Today, visitors who walk across the windswept hill of Hisarlik see only fragments of stone. Without context, they can appear surprisingly ordinary. Yet beneath those ruins lie thousands of years of human ambition, trade, conflict, and memory. The legend of Troy did not survive because every detail was true. It survived because somewhere within the legend, there was a real city. And that realization changes the way we think not only about Troy, but about history itself. For centuries, people believed they had to choose between two possibilities. Either Troy was real, or it was nothing more than a myth. Today, archaeology suggests that the truth is far more fascinating. Troy was real, but not exactly as Homer described it. And Homer may not have invented the story. Instead, he may have inherited memories of a world that had already vanished long before he was born. That realization changes everything. The Iliad is no longer seen simply as fiction, nor is it treated as a literal historical record. Instead, many historians regard it as a literary masterpiece, rooted in cultural memory, a story in which genuine places, political realities, and perhaps even distant memories of real conflicts became woven together with poetry, symbolism, and myth. That is why Troy continues to captivate us. Not because every detail can be proven, but because enough of the story turned out to be true. A wealthy Bronze Age city really stood near the Dardanelles. Its massive fortifications defended one of the most strategically important locations in the Eastern Mediterranean. It traded with powerful kingdoms across the ancient world. It rose. It prospered. It suffered destruction. It was rebuilt again and again, until eventually it disappeared beneath centuries of earth. The legends survived long after the city itself had vanished. Ironically, those legends became the city's greatest protection. If Homer had never written the Iliad, the name Troy might have disappeared forever. The hill at Hisarlik would have remained just another rise in the Anatolian countryside. Its walls would have continued sleeping beneath the soil. Its people would have remained anonymous. Instead, poetry preserved a memory that archaeology would rediscover nearly 3,000 years later. The search for Troy also transformed archaeology itself. When Heinrich Schliemann began digging in 1870, archaeology was still a young discipline. Excavation often resembled treasure hunting. Large trenches were cut through ancient sites. Attention focused on spectacular discoveries rather than careful documentation. Schliemann's work reflected the methods of his time. His determination changed history. His mistakes changed archaeology. Later generations learned an equally valuable lesson from Troy. Every archaeological layer matters. Every fragment tells part of the story. Every mistake destroys information that can never be recovered. Today, archaeologists work with extraordinary precision. They record every wall before removing a single stone. They analyze pollen trapped in ancient soil. They examine microscopic residues inside pottery. They reconstruct environments using seeds, animal bones, and chemical traces invisible to the naked eye. The greatest discoveries are no longer always made with picks and shovels. Sometimes they emerge from laboratories. Sometimes from satellite images. Sometimes from technologies that allow researchers to look beneath the ground without disturbing it. The story of Troy continues to evolve because archaeology itself continues to evolve. Every generation asks new questions. Every generation develops new tools. And every generation sees the ancient city through a different lens. There are still mysteries. We still do not know whether a single conflict inspired the legend of the Trojan War, or whether Homer combined many separate events into one unforgettable epic. We do not know whether there was ever a king named Priam, exactly as he appears in the Iliad. We cannot confirm the existence of Achilles. There is no archaeological evidence for Helen of Sparta. And despite centuries of imagination, no evidence has ever been found for the famous wooden horse. That does not mean the story is meaningless. On the contrary, the absence of evidence for individual characters reminds us that archaeology and literature answer different questions. Archaeology asks, what happened? Literature asks, what did it mean? One reconstructs events. The other preserves memory. Together, they give us something richer than either could provide alone. Perhaps that is why Troy still feels alive. Its ruins are silent. Yet every year, thousands of visitors climb the hill at Hisarlik. They stand beside weathered limestone walls built more than 3,000 years ago. They look across the plains toward the Dardanelles. The same winds that once filled Bronze Age sails still sweep across the landscape. The same sun rises over the same hills. The stones remain. The sea remains. The geography that shaped history has barely changed. For a brief moment, the distance between myth and reality seems to disappear. You realize that somewhere beneath your feet, generations of people laughed, traded, argued, celebrated, feared, and dreamed. Children played in streets, now buried beneath layers of earth. Merchants negotiated prices. Craftsmen shaped bronze. Soldiers stood watch from the towering walls. None of them knew that thousands of years later, the world would remember their city through a poem. History rarely survives intact. Time erases names. Buildings collapse. Empires disappear. Languages
are forgotten. What remains are fragments. A broken wall, a clay tablet, a piece of pottery, a line of poetry. Individually, they tell us very little. Together, they allow us to rebuild entire civilizations. Troy reminds us that the boundary between myth and history is rarely a straight line. Sometimes, myths preserve echoes of real places. Sometimes, legends carry memories that outlive kingdoms. Sometimes the stories we dismiss as impossible become the starting point for extraordinary discoveries. The lost city of Troy was never simply a tale about war. It was a story about memory, about how civilizations choose what to remember, about how stories survive when monuments fall, and about how, beneath layers of earth and centuries of doubt, the past is often waiting patiently for someone willing to look again. More than 3,000 years after its destruction, Troy still asks the same question it has always asked. How much of our history is still hidden beneath the ground, waiting to be rediscovered?